So then we are back with more understandings from the renewed covenant from the Aramaic English translation of the word. And these days it's very important understanding where the Creator came from in terms of the influence of His Son and the main objective of the renewed covenant, speaking of the holy tabernacles and the discipline yet coming shortly, because Shaliach Shaul and many other Shilishim said regarding the discipline of Elohim, and also Shimon, he said that discipline is coming upon his tabernacles because his people have neglected the holy tabernacles for centuries. So then understanding what the world versus then the tabernacles, what those are and what they mean when a person is speaking of then the plans of Elohim and then the prophetic timeline, also then the events present before our own eyes. So then understanding the viewpoint of the Messiah came and he brought the first anointing for the second service. This was then talked before and explained, and the Messiah was then a person related with Ruach HaKodesh, as people understand. He is only given to those who are saved and then related with the holy tabernacles. And those people having those understandings, they can relate when the Messiah then, he was involved with his miracles. There is a very important area where then Yochanan explains the Messiah, and we understand Yochanan, he was then the disciple or then the Shaliach. Then he explains in the 6th chapter of Yochanan where then the Messiah performed then the miracle. Obviously then afterwards then they want to take him by force to make him a king. We understand the Messiah, he brought the kingship and also the priestly line, but those were then related with the kingdom to come government. The people, while then they experienced his miracle, they wanted a king to fit their own kingdom in this earth. And the Messiah had no part in it, because he came to bring the first anointing for the second service. So then his people in his holy camps and the tabernacles would then direct the people outside of the tabernacles on how to deal with their problems. But they themselves, to set apart, they were not to involve themselves with the world's system. They were to remain neutral. That's why then when you understand that Moshe brought the people out of Egypt, and then the Creator brought them to the desert, a very far away place, gives you the understanding of the non-relational understanding of the holy tabernacle. So then in the future, when they would go around the world forming tabernacles and holy camps, then they would remain then neutral. That's why then the Messiah, he didn't want to be their king. And then he secluded himself to pray. So then these days, what it means then Israel and what they are doing. Unfortunately, they are mixed with the world system, precisely what the Messiah told them not to do. And the Messiah said what he meant, and he meant what he said. So then they should in fact be involved in the second service and then be in the tabernacles and exercise in the second service. The priestly line should never halted their services. However, there was a transitional time because they were not ready for the first anointing. If they were secluded in the city of Jerusalem during the time he came, the priestly line services would easily be then transitioned. Since the city was open, there were Gentiles mixed with his elect, and then politics of the world mixed with religion, religion then mixed with the holy laws. There were more than 10,000 laws mixed with the holy laws. It's a bit over 600 of the holy laws, and there were more than 10,000. And then pagan governments mixed with people, and then Gentiles mixed with then elect in the relationships. It was absolutely a mixture. And that's why it had taken around 100 years to get the plan going. That's why when you read Yehuda, then you find the people lined up to form another tabernacle in another holy land. That's the meaning of it. If then the people would, during the time of the Messiah, would have the city closed as per then the design of Moses, the transition would have then taken place a whole lot faster. They would then train the people in Jerusalem, and they would go out then in sets, and then they would form the holy lands around the world. But no, they decided to do their own plan, and then it had taken more, even around 100 years, to get the plan then where it should be. So then when you read Yochanan, the 6th chapter, you understand that it was then the third miracle, then the bread and the fish. And because they had experienced his presence, the presence of Elohim amongst them, then they wanted him to perform as per their own desire of government. Because that's how then it was handed over from the time of Shlomo or Solomon. But then greater than Solomon was then in their presence. Greater. That's why the Messiah did not want any kind of a kingship of their own. So then when you read the actions of the Messiah, it relates then later with the tabernacles, because the Messiah was and is, and he shall be ever the tabernacle. Living tabernacle. He was the living tabernacle while he walked on the earth. So then his example was to seclude himself. He then went up to pray, and he was there in prayer. He was, in quote, cultivating then the relationship with his Father. But then in the future, people then they scandalized, or then rather than obeying what he said to do, then they are doing the contrary. Israel these days, they are lost in terms of the renewed covenant plan. And there they are beating around then the Arabs, and then they are having trouble with Palestinians, and they have trouble with Iran, and it's like they have trouble with every person. They can't maintain a straight line with any country nearly. And what was then the teachings of the Messiah? The Messiah told them not to be involved with the kingships of the world. They should be secluded in the camps as per the desire and the plan of the Creator himself. Through Moshe, he gave the model, and then later they would go around the world forming holy lands, and it had to take them 100 years to get the camps going. So then what does it say? Whatsoever then the Hebraic people not obeying the Messiah, then they are stealing. And the Creator said, thou shalt not steal. Because when the Messiah is not obeyed, the natural consequences is stealing from somebody else. And this somebody else is then the Gentiles around the world and their trades. The Messiah, he was involved with the kingship of the world. When you think during the time of the Messiah, then he was involved then with the pagan countries, pagan sources of understanding. He was involved with a very bad government, and he had to fit with the existing parameter of the government, including stealing. The Messiah told them, be in their camps and then make sure to exercise the second service with the first anointing he brought. 7 spirits of Elohim, 7 functions. So these days it makes no distinction, makes no furtherance in their belief if they read the Torah, if they maintain the Shabbat. However, they are not doing what the Messiah told them to do. The first service is over with. They should never be involved anymore with the first service. Practicing the service of the first covenant is a sin. It is contrary what the Messiah said to do. Because when the people, the Hebraic people, they go against what the Messiah told them to do, then you combine the 600 plus laws that he gave, and you combine them together as a sin. Not only they would be guilty of then a sin, but the entire Torah. So it makes no sense for them to get around on the Shabbat if they are not obeying what the Messiah told them to do. Because the worship, what they should be doing, they should be in their camps, in the Holy of Holies, engaged in worship. The worship of the Messiah. The Messiah is there, and the prayers through the Messiah goes up to heaven. That's what they should be doing. The rotation of the priests is as it was before, but rather than sacrificing animals, they should be engaged in worship. Day and night, 24/7, as they did during the time of Moshe. Because the problem is not anymore going to the Holy of Holies. They have the presence of the Holy of Holies. So then if they set up the tabernacle, they have a replica of the copy of the Ark of the Covenant, the Messiah is there. And they engage themselves then in worship. And then the spiritual nearing line, then they are maintained. They then are those Gentiles linked in the spirit with each of those holy places. And they are being maintained by the worship of the priests. People are not made kings and priests. Kings and priests were for those that were then the set apart. They would be involved in a camp's service. Gentiles are Gentiles. They remain Gentiles until they die. Only those the Mashiach then brings in the camp through Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh points them, bring this person into the camp for further teaching. Then the person invited become a proclaimer of the kingdom to come government, and is involved then in the service of the priests. Gentiles, they are born as Gentiles, they die as Gentiles. If they are not invited in a camp, they die as Gentiles. They have no titles. Because if you read the word anywhere, king and priest, no, you are not. You are a Gentile. You remain as a Gentile. You are saved. You believe in the Mashiach. And then you show up at the gate for further instructions. But you are a Gentile, or Goyim, or Guam. People think then they read the word, then the Mashiach say you are going to be kings and priests. He was not talking of then the Gentiles, he was talking of the set apart. That's why he said in Matthew, the 23rd chapter, from the 1st to the 3rd verse, whatsoever Moses told you to do, these do and observe, including the tabernacle. The tabernacle-service. Kings and priests were those elect living in a camp, or the camps. Those were the proclaimers of the kingdom to come government. They were not to be mixed with existing government. They were remaining secluded in their camps, and then the priests would be engaged in worship of the Mashiach. Through the Mashiach they worship, and then goes up to heaven and glorifies, in quotes the word glorifies, because nobody can glorify Elohim, he is already in glory. But they worship and exalt his name. They experience the presence of Elohim, thus priests. Then those who are engaged in teaching the 7 functions of Elohim, then those who are then the proclaimers, and they shepherd the Gentiles. Gentiles are Gentiles. Those are having no titles. They have no Ruach HaKodesh. They are not inhabited by any kind of a spirit related with heaven. They merely show up at the gate for further instructions. And when the Hebraic people, they don't understand this area, and they don't want to have the service, they don't want to exercise the second service, then they steal. Because the only recourse for them then is then be competitive with the world system. And they ended up stealing the work of the Gentiles. And then the world gets pushed with the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, whereas they should be secluded in their camps and neutral. What was the Mashiach doing in the 6th chapter of Yochanan? He remained neutral. He gave, he was there, he performed the third miracle, the bread and the fish. And then afterwards they want to do more, and he wanted them to stay away from them. He remained neutral. He went up to the mountain to pray, to remain neutral. This is what the camp should be, neutral. So then these days, where Israel is absolutely lost, they don't understand the work of the Messiah. Most of them don't. And rather than understanding from the viewpoint of the Messiah based on what the Messiah said, then they're trying to do on their own. Then Shaul said in Hebrews, they must have a teacher to teach them the first principles of the oracles, because they are performing parts of the first service and it is an abomination. Shaul said that the first was completed, so then the second would be established. But the Hebraic people, what they are doing when they get together is an abomination, is putrid, is disgusting. It doesn't please Elohim. So then the proper understanding is encourage then the people, the Hebraic people, to return to their services, the second service, and then understand the first anointing, understand the services of the tabernacles. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.